Hey, what's going on everybody? It's Dom from Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals, and welcome back to the channel. I'm super excited to bring you this week's video because this week I did a 4K 120FPS shootout between these two cameras, the EOS R5 and the Sony A7S III, two very exciting cameras that have come out this past year. So a big spec for each of these cameras is 120 frames per second recording in 4K, which if you're a video shooter, you know that is a big deal because that combination of resolution and frame rate is usually reserved for cinema cameras. And now both of these companies have allowed you to achieve that in a mirrorless sized camera body, which is really exciting. So in this video, I'm going to show you a bunch of 4K 120 FPS video taken in all sorts of scenarios on both of these cameras. We're going to be looking at the overall image quality. I did a low light test, a rolling shutter test, and we're even going to see if the video quality falls apart at all when the sensor is overloaded with information. So before we dive into the footage, I'm going to briefly talk about the codecs that each of these cameras use in these modes, and then I'm briefly going to talk about CF Express Media, which is basically how these recording modes are possible for these cameras in the first place. So let's get that stuff out of the way, and then we'll dive into the footage and the tests. So the Canon EOS R5 is able to record 4K 120 FPS using its H.265 codec in 10-bit 422 in both flavors of 4K, DCI and UHD. It can also do this in its H.264 codec, except that's going to be 8-bit 420 and you're going to see a considerable quality loss there. But incredibly, the bitrate for this recording mode in each of its codecs is 1880 megabytes per second. You heard that right. That's almost 2 gigs a second of recorded video. And you can imagine the file sizes are absolutely enormous. You can only achieve this frame rate internally in the EOS R5, and that is the fastest frame rate that this camera is capable of. Next, in the A7S III, we have a few differences. The Sony will allow you to record 4K 120 FPS in its A7sIII codec, and that's also 10-bit 422. But it's only 4K UHD and not DCI. Unlike the Canon though, this frame rate is available in all of Sony's codecs, and when you drop down to 1080 or Full HD, you can shoot in 240 frames per second, which is noteworthy. What's also notable is that you can actually record 4K 120 FPS onto an SD card on the Sony A7S III. But this limits you to long GOP recording at a very constricted 280 Mbps. However, to get the most out of this recording mode, you're going to need CF Express Type A media, which is going to allow you to shoot in all I, and that uses a much beefier 1200 megabytes per second bitrate. So if you haven't figured it out by now, this new type of media, CF Express, is basically what allows for this recording mode in these cameras. Like I said, on the Sony, you can record 4K 120 FPS onto an SD card, but at a very bottlenecked bitrate, and it just doesn't look as good as the All-I. So this is pretty much where I put my foot down and say, if you want to record good-looking 4K 120 FPS video on either of these cameras, you're going to need CF Express media, Type A in the case of the Sony, and Type B for the Canon. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's take a look at some 4K 120 FPS footage from each of these cameras. First off, we're going to look at some water tank stuff I shot in the studio, and I think this will be a good test of overall quality. Next, I did a simple rolling shutter test, and both of these cameras did really well here. Lastly, I did this confetti test to see if the fidelity of the video falls apart when the sensor is overloaded with information. After that, I did a low light test with some candles and matches. Also, here's some video of my cat. Okay, so that's pretty much gonna wrap up this 4K 120 FPS shootout between the Canon EOS R5 and the Sony A7S III. So if you have any questions or insights about 4K 120 FPS shooting, drop a comment in the comment section and we can start a discussion. Also, while you're down there, if you like this video, hit it with a thumbs up. And if you're not already, subscribe to the channel. And if you are subscribed, you can hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and that'll let you know when we post new content, which is every week. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video and we'll see you in the next one.